Hey everybody. In this series of videos, we're looking at the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1 to see people who are waiting for grace. God's grace is a consistent theme throughout all the Bible, and we see that one of the lessons of the great story of Scripture is not that morals save you, but that the grace of God has to break through into people that would otherwise be broken by corruption and their own brokenness and sin. And one story that illustrates this, it comes from two people in the genealogy of Jesus. If you read the genealogy closely, you'll see the names Judah and Tamar. And we have to go back to Genesis 38 to see this very fascinating story, full of intrigue and full of suspense. Judah had a child named and he got a wife for named Tamar. But it says, all we're told is that he's a wicked man and the Lord killed him. And so she didn't have a child with him. And then Judah gives Tamar another one of his sons, who likewise dies before they have children. And so Tamar here she is, maybe not even 20 years old, already a widow 2 times. And for a woman in the ancient world, that is the most vulnerable, economically weak place to be in as a widow, much less a widow who's so young and she's not going to be able to find someone who will marry her, sadly. And so God made a provision to care for women in this situation called the Levirate Law. The Levirate Law basically made the woman's father-in-law to be her defender and her protector. And so if the son dies, then his brother has to provide a child for her, or be kind of an interim husband, I guess you could say. Or the father just has to keep protecting her and taking care of her. But Judah doesn't do this. She's depending on Judah, and he keeps stringing her along. He says, okay, I've got a third son, but I'll give you this son when he's old enough to marry. But he's lying. He's just stringing her along because he thinks she is the reason his sons keep dying. 2 of his sons have died when they married this woman, and he doesn't want his third child to die, so he's looking out for himself. It's important to see here that Tamar is a victim. She has no control over this. Her husband's died. She's the one who's victimized, but Judah feels like he's the victim in this story. So Tamar has a very bold plan. She changes out of her clothes of mourning and changes into what would appear in the day to be the clothes of a prostitute. And she goes out and waits, covers her face and wears all the decorations they would wear at that time. And Judah passes by and he solicits her, and she comes into him and he goes into her, and that's how it is. So he promises to pay for her services. And so she says, give me some collateral. So he gives a signet, a cord, a staff, and she keeps it as collateral. Okay, fast forward. She becomes pregnant by Judah as she was dressed as a prostitute. 3 months later, she's pregnant. She's beginning to show now. Someone goes to Judah and says, hey, Tamar, your daughter-in-law has been immoral. She's pregnant by who knows who. He says, bring her to me so we can burn her. Can you believe that? He wants to burn her because of what he thinks she has done. And so when she hears about this, she sends to him the staff, the cord, the signet, and she says, tell me whose this is. Do you recognize this? And then he says, she is more righteous than I am. And then she has twins. The first one is named Perez, and she names him Perez because it means breakthrough. You have broken through. So what do we make of this really weird story? These two people who are broken themselves, a victim and a victimizer, what do we make of them waiting for grace? I think we can make 2 points here. Are we like Judah? Are we those who are blaming others? Are we the ones who hurt others, but we blame others to justify ourselves and to make ourselves feel better? Also, or we could say, are we like Tamar? Maybe someone truly is a victim. Maybe you've been blamed by others for their sins and the consequences of their actions, and you're left alone with nothing. Now, I should point out that the scripture does not really condone any of the actions of Judah or Tamar. It's just saying what happens. But I do believe what we all need is for the greater Judah, Judah's ancestor and greater son, Jesus Christ, to look at us and say, you are righteous. By my grace, you are righteous. There are no heroes in the Bible except Jesus Christ. God is the only hero in Scripture. Judah and Tamar are not. They are people who are broken in their own ways, a victimizer and victimized, and they need grace. So it's not about who's moral and who isn't. It's about God's grace breaking through. Join us next time. We'll talk about someone else who's waiting for grace.